Hey, greetings, friends, and welcome to week 7. This is going to be lecture 3. There's going to be one more lecture after this one. If you're continuing on your PowerPoint, there's another great quote here. It says, if you do not develop your corporate culture, it will develop itself. Corporate culture doesn't happen by accident, and if it does, you're taking a great risk, and I couldn't agree with that more. Here is the opportunity for us. We've got to think about not only culture as being the saboteur of our big dreams and great vision, but also the power of culture is where big dreams and great plans can thrive. In the Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership by John Maxwell, he talks about the big mo, and he means momentum. He says when momentum is on your side, momentum has a way of making you seem better than you are. But when you don't have momentum on your side, he says that it can make you look worse than you actually are. Now, I want to shift that truth away from momentum for a moment, and I want us to focus on the way in which that's articulated within our cultures. I think a strong, healthy, vibrant culture can actually make us look better than we are, or at least give us the grace when we're not as good as we need to be in the moment. I think a healthy culture often makes up for operational mistakes and missteps. If you have a strong, healthy, vibrant culture within the context of your church that is consistent and coherent with the vision and the mission, even if there's missteps along the way, or even if there's changes along the way, or even if there's disruptions along the way, that culture can carry you through even when operationally you're not as efficient or effective as that you hope to be. It can create honest and effective feedback loops, which I think is a part of creative and healthy cultures, that in the midst of those mistakes and missteps, this stuff's not swept under the rug. It's not there's not this overreaction against them, but there's this safe space of vulnerability where there's feedback loops that helps us to become a better version of ourselves as an organization and a church. And it carries an organization amidst crisis and change. And I want to say this. Go back to Bridgeway and Dale Schaefer. He had architected such an incredibly strong culture that for 9 months without a lead pastor, after only being 9 years old, it was this church board leadership team that carried the weight of finding a new pastor, but helped facilitate the steadiness of the church because the culture was unmoved. It was shaped in such a way that they knew who they were, and even if they couldn't take new steps about developing new strategies and new action plans, they could live out and embody their culture with a clear sense of mission. And people were coming to know Jesus and being baptized even during the 9-month interim of not having a senior pastor, which I think is phenomenal. And so when I was able to come into that, I was able to ride the waves of the strong culture even as I was thinking about and adapting things operationally. Now, I will tell you this. I'm going to be vulnerable with you for a moment. One of the challenges is they had a clearly articulated 8 elements of their values, which played into their culture. And eight was a lot, and honestly, I think I probably misinterpreted people's lack of knowing all of those elements, and so we made some shifts, and I don't think I rooted the culture well enough in my tenure to be able to give the next pastor the same blessing that I had coming in. So that was on me, and I embraced that, and I think, again, it taught me the importance of ensuring that we have a strong, healthy, vibrant culture that is handed off and handed away to those who may come after us. There's a great quote here by an architect. His name's Buckminster Fuller, who says, "You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete." I think that's a beautiful quote in terms of what we're dealing with when we're talking about culture. Too often we identify these competing and contradictory and toxic cultures, and we want to fight against them, we want to rail against them. We have to build something that is so much more compelling that it makes the other culture seem like, why was that even a part of who we are? That doesn't even fit us anymore. Now, architecting a healthy culture, I think, is really important for us to understand. And I'm a big believer in the power of agency and self-efficacy. Agency is one's capacity to act. Self-efficacy is one's capacity to act upon a vision or a dream, okay? To be able to be future-oriented. Humanity isn't simply bound to or prisoner to the cultures that exist. Humanity exists as culture creator, and I think Andy Couch does a great job in that in his book Culture Making. This empowerment is central to us breaking free from the binds that keep us and restrict us from living into the mission and the vision that God has for us. Now, architecting a culture takes a few steps. One, you got to identify the existing and non-existing culture of an organization. And I do want to suggest that there are some cultures that are so ambiguous you're not even really sure what they are. Consider the kind of culture necessary to fulfill your vision. As you begin a sense of what the vision that God is calling us to, what kind of culture is going to be necessary in order for that to become a reality? And then identify the places of misalignment. But then you begin to displace or put into place a culture that is consistent with the vision. Now, in just a bit, I'm going to give you a model that's going to help you to do that. But I want you to know on the front end that this is going to take time, okay? It takes time to develop and shape a culture. It's not something you can do overnight. It's something that takes place within the shared communal life of the organization. And as a leader, one must be humble, empathetic, and consistent in this process. If we try to impose culture, if we try to come off as elitist, like y'all are just a hot mess and I'm going to fix you, if we are not sensitive to the way in which these changes are going to impact our people, and if we don't stay steady and consistent in the process, we're going to miss an opportunity to really make a significant change in terms of the culture. Andy Couch says that any change that is significant just simply takes time, and there's probably no greater significant change that's going to take time than changing culture that may have been embedded in the life of an organization literally for decades. And you've got to notice and celebrate subtle shifts or examples of that culture that you want to see grow and flourish within the context of your organization. That means when you're in a board meeting and you experience a shift in culture, where instead of somebody jumping a new idea, they instead ask the question, "Hey, I'm struggling to understand. Can you explain to me what you mean there?" Versus just trying to shut it down. Celebrate that. Say, look what God is doing in our midst now. God is bringing and growing us to be a team that learns how to listen better and be able to celebrate those moments, because that'll bear the evidence of the cultural change that's taking place in your midst. Now, I think one of the things, there's a book called The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle, and I would invite you to pick it up. It's really a great book. He identifies 3 pieces of the skill set for building a healthy culture in which teams can thrive. He talks about building safety. Yeah, we've got to move beyond the dualisms. You're either with us or against us. That you're a part of us, right? And we're all a part of this together. And we've got to build safety within the context of our cultural skill set and organization to ensure that people can feel like as they navigate change, as they bear up under the struggles of figuring what healthy culture looks like, that this is a safe space to explore that. You're not going to be ridiculed or betrayed in your vulnerability when your vulnerability springs up in the midst of cultural change. We've got to share vulnerability. A cultural shift or the creation of culture can feel threatening to people, which requires us to embed and embody within our lives and the organization itself empathy, authenticity, connection, and courage. Empathy is one's ability to experience life as someone else is experiencing it. Authenticity is the reality of who we are. That if we're going to create a healthy culture, we can't be presuming something or wearing masks. We've got to build connectedness. This is one of the most challenging things for some of us who are introverted leaders, because connection is something we have to work towards. You don't have to be connected, just some gregarious person in all these large settings. What you do have to do is make intentional connections regularly with your leaders and the people that you lead, so that they understand that you're sharing this space with them. And then it takes courage to push in and press in when those competing and contradictory cultures emerge from time to time. And then you've got to establish a sense of purpose. You've got to develop patterns of communication, practice, and feedback, because culture doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists as it's practiced, and we'll talk about that within the model I'm going to share with you in just a moment. And be intentional about establishing collective practices that set a high bar of expectation for who you're called to be. So, for instance, We want to change the way in which newcomers are embraced and assimilated within the life of the congregation. Set a high bar for the people who are working in your hospitality ministry, those people who are going to serve as greeters or out in the parking lot. Set a high bar that they recognize how valuable they are in those first impressions of making those connections. Set a high bar for your small group leaders to ensure that they're both recruiting people out of the congregation to join their small groups, but then also helping to make those people that join those small groups feel deeply connected and a part of who you are as an organization and as a small group. So I wanted to give you one example. So as Bridgeway, as we were beginning to think about making the shift to be a rapidly multiplying organization where we wanted to plant churches and establish campuses, we knew that we had to make some intentional shifts within our leadership culture. Many of our folks were brand new to ministry, and we were trying to learn this all together. It wasn't something that any of us had done in mass scale before. And so we had to ask the question, okay, if we're going to become a multiplying church, and we're expecting that out of our congregation, we've got a sense of vision and values as a congregation, what kind of culture do we need to create within our leadership team itself so that there are no obstacles or barriers, and that who we are as a leadership team is consistent and coherent with the vision that we have as an organization and a congregation? So we developed the 5 key components of what became our leadership culture, and that was clarity. And I'm not going to read all these to you. You can check them out on the PowerPoint. Synergy, empowerment, discipline, and consistency. We began to realize that those were key elements of the culture that we needed to create, and you can read the definitions of those, in order for us to fulfill the purposes that we had as a leadership team in service of the vision, in service of the mission for our congregation that had a culture to fulfill the purposes that God had created us for. In this last lecture that I'm going to share with you, I'm going to share with you a model I developed for my dissertation that helps us to begin to walk through the process of beginning to clarify what all of this looks like in real time.